When talking about the history of Le Mans, the topic of manufacturers and their dominant runs is always a topic that is brought up. Whether it be Bentley in the 1920s, Ferrari in the early 1960s, Ford in the mid to late 60s, or Porsche throughout the entirety of the 1980s, one manufacturer stands out. Audi Sport won the 24-hour Endurance Classic 13 times in 18 attempts, and it scored at least a podium in every single attempt at Le Mans. Across 18 years and 9 variations of LMP prototypes and technology ranging from direct injection gasoline engines to diesel and later diesel hybrids, the lasting legacy of Audi at Le Mans will never be forgotten. To this point in time, no manufacturer has won so many times in such a short period of time. To better understand what made the German marque so successful, we traveled to a small farm town on the Indiana-Ohio border to meet with one of the former engineers, who knew every intricate detail of the operation. Meet Brad Kettler, a world-renowned engineer who has worked with Acura, Porsche, Audi, Mazda, and now Lamborghini on their new LMDH SC63. He is most known for his time steering the ship at Audi Sport, and under his watchful eye, Audi accomplished numerous race wins across the globe, several national championships, and 2 world championships, and engineered the last American-flagged overall win in 2005. In this series, we will tell the story start to finish with a first-hand account of the definition of domination, the story of Audi at Le Mans. Our story begins not at the Cathedral of Endurance Racing at Le Mans, but in Austria in 1980. This is where Audi Sport would formally debut as a constructor with their new Group B Quattro. This car would pioneer the motorsport discipline of rallying and define a generation, taking 23 victories and 2 championships in 5 years in the FIA World Rally Championship. During this time, Audi would debut their slogan, Vorsprung durch Technik, advancement through technology, a slogan that would be at the heart of Audi Sport for years to come. In 1987, Audi would quit rallying altogether after reading the writing on the wall that Group B would soon be banned, after several drivers and co-drivers were killed in severe accidents, and controversy regarding the legality of certain cars in certain regions of Europe. After lying mostly dormant in the motorsport world for almost a decade, Audi would decide to take on a new challenge in 1997, Le Mans. Its goal would be to design and develop a new LMP by 1999 and enter it at the Great Race. Their goal was to take on the likes of Porsche, Toyota, and Mercedes, and many, many more. The car would officially be unveiled in 1998. It resembled many open cockpit prototypes of the time, but with obvious Audi styling cues. The chassis would be built by Dallara and fitted with a 3.6-liter Audi twin-turbo V8. The car would debut at Sebring slightly altered from its launch specification. It would manage a 3rd place finish, 3 laps behind the overall winning BMW V12 LMR. But the real test would come some 3 months later. After an impressive showing at Sebring, Audi would resume testing with Team Yost, who would campaign the R8R Roadsters. They would soon be joined by Audi Sport UK with their new GT1 class R8C Coupe. In the run-up to Le Mans, they would measure well against their competitors. At the pre-event test, they would beat out Mercedes and Nissan, placing 8th and 11th. The younger R8C would experience a baptism of fire, only placing 22nd and 28th after experiencing many handling issues and aerodynamic issues that would cause the rear bodywork to separate from the car at speed. Le Mans 1999 is truly a standout in the history of the Endurance Classic. It featured no less than 7 manufacturers, all of whom were capable of winning overall. The storylines are all well known, but to do a brief recap, Mercedes had lost 2 of their entries, and the 3rd one being forced out of the race after 3 flips during the event, 2 in qualifying and warm-up, and 1 during the race. They would never again return to the Circuit de la Sarthe. Toyota had experienced heartbreak losing the overall win once again. 2 of their entries went out overnight following high-speed punctures, and they lost the race overall in the final hour due to a high-speed puncture by Katayama. BMW would take their first and only overall win at the Circuit de la Sarthe with their V12 LMR. But in all of this, it is almost forgotten that Audi pulled off an overall podium. In fact, the 2 R8Rs from Team Yost managed 3rd and 4th overall. This would mark the beginning of a podium streak that would only be broken in 2017 after they had left and the LMP1 program wound down. The R8R concept proved to be reliable, with the Achilles heel being the gearbox. Otherwise, the first generation of the R8 showed true potential. The Audi Sport UK entries suffered from a less than glorious fate. The two R8Cs were plagued with issues from the start. Like its open-top sister, the coupes also suffered from gearbox issues. But the rushed nature of the program proved to be a massive hurdle, as the C variant was less serviceable during the race and the turnaround time for repairs was dramatically longer, taking away any possibility for a decent result. By mid-morning, both C variants were out of the race with gearbox issues. In the aftermath, Audi decided to axe the GTP coupe in favor of the LMP R8R, which would be redesigned and evolved into the R8 we know now. Come March of 2000, Audi unloaded its Sebring loaded for bear. Off the trailers came two new shiny LMP 900 R8s that had been redesigned from the ground up. In sports cars, many changes year over year are subtle. However, this R8 was not subtle. Almost every component had been redesigned from the previous year's R8R.
Well, I mean, we saw the potential of the R8C, although we were, as we observed the car being raced at Sebring and at Charlotte and some of the other tests that it went to, it was clear that the team was struggling with it, inherently as well. The car had a kind of crazy understeer characteristic and very, very light front axle, and was kind of difficult to manage. I don't remember very much more about it, but we watched the guys working on that and so forth. And I know that I'm not sure who the designer was for the R8C, but I know Michael Fadnauer was involved in the design of the R8 LMP car, and he's also famous for Porsche Spider, same design. And that they had a lot of really advanced ideas that they had come together quite quickly, and they ended up with a prototype running really before all their best ideas were collected. But it was on purpose. It was to get mileage. It was to get the functionality of the car sorted out. It was the beginning of using the Megaline shift system with the automated paddles run by pneumatics. That was a big deal on that car. And that car actually had a shift lever as well as a pneumatic shifter in it. The twin molded car did, and so forth. So there was a lot being learned there. But in terms of what you could recognize from one car to the other, I would say probably the engine, some pieces on the engine is about it as far as what I can remember. Now, I never really worked on the R8C, so I just know it from looking at it and seeing its parts in the archives and so on and so forth. I know enough about it that I can recognize the parts for it, and very few of them were used on the later car.
So essentially after its debut season, I know it competed a couple races in the ALMS in 2000, but Audi took it back to the shop, completely tore everything down, and just rebuilt from the ground up. But this time with actual...
It was a different car. I mean, once the car changed into being the single roll hoop car, the car that we all recognize, and so forth, it was a completely different ballgame. And from the first time I saw that car, I remember being in there was a special measurement room there in Ingolstadt, and I remember I saw one of the first ones there sitting on the floor, dark, non-reflective paint on it, and I mean, it just looked so incredibly purposeful and svelte, and just looked efficient and slick. And like many race cars, when they're really right, they look right. And I mean, it looked right, like from the jump. And walking up next to it and having it be just a little bit taller than your knee, the side pod, it was like, this thing's gonna be, it's gonna be slick. Because sports cars had been a lot more kind of big and tall, and big Group C cars with big high wing plates and stuff on them. They're kind of big cars, and the R8 was down low and was very, very purposeful and beautiful. And its first impression of seeing it the first time never left me. Yeah.
The new R8 would face off against the same car that had beat it the year previous, the BMW V12 LMR. The effects of the new car showed immediately, as in qualifying, The pair were 6 seconds up from their benchmark from the year previous. At the end of the 12-hour, Audi would stand on the top 2 steps of the overall podium, with BMW relegated to third, 1 lap behind. After their first major endurance triumph, Audi and Team Joest would partake in a grueling endurance testing program in Europe, preparing for their return to Le Mans. However, testing was not picture perfect. One major issue continued to be a recurring problem: the gearbox. One major change that was made was not the gearbox itself, but the serviceability of it, or should I say, replaceability. One of the bright sides of having the most keen minds in sports car racing together developing one car is the innovations that come out of it. In this case, Audi and Team Joest figured a way to change the whole rear assembly, gearbox and all, in under 5 minutes. This was done using quick disconnects and as few bolts as possible to fit the rear assembly onto the car. At Le Mans, this would pay dividends. However, the usefulness of this innovation would be short-lived, as it would be banned soon after. In comparison to 1999, Le Mans 2000 is relatively forgotten. Gone were the major factory efforts from BMW, Toyota, and Mercedes, and in came Cadillac and Chrysler, with Peugeot moving to a contender position after taking a back seat from the major manufacturers in the previous few years. Come qualifying, an eerie sight donned the scoreboards. 1, 2, and 3, Audi. 3 full seconds clear of the nearest car. Come Saturday, all eyes were on the black, red, and yellow accented silver R8s from Team Joest. Team Joest was the obvious favorite, but the big question was, could they go the distance and not run into terminal problems? The short answer would be yes, but it was not a flawless run. At the start, the 3 sister cars would set sail, pulling away from the entire field with the exception of one of the Peugeot's entries. Audi would maintain the formation running with the number 9 entry at the head of the field. In the overnight, the numbers 9 and 7 would have to stop to make rear end changes, while the 8 entry clicked on. By the end, the mostly trouble-free number 8 of Tom Christensen, Frank Biela, and Emanuele Pirot took the win, with cars 7 and 9 second and third, 3 laps separating all 3 entries. The next nearest car would be the Pescara Courage, but it was some 24 laps behind. Le Mans 2000 was not only the start of a new millennium, but the true start of a dynasty. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single lap where Audi did not lead that year, a trend that would continue over the next few years. 2001 would bring a few more upgrades to the R8. After adding Petit Le Mans to their 2000 trophy cabinet alongside Sebring and Le Mans, Audi would really start optimizing their Le Mans prototype. Features were added like the FSI direct injection system, as well as a refined and more durable gearbox to adapt to rule changes following 2000. The overall design was improved and perfected, and another big change would be Team Joest would no longer be the only team competing with the R8. 2001 would see customer entries like Champion Racing lining up on the grid to take on the factory counterparts from Joest. Engineers got their hands on the most enticing car of the time. The amazement of their new weapon was evident.
Sensible, modular design, serviceability, DI engine, one of the first mega successful usages of direct injection. It's considered to be pretty groundbreaking stuff when it was done. And, the Audi engine department, Boretsky's department, hit it out of the park with it. I mean, it was great from the very beginning. Where other people couldn't really do it, they did it, made it look easy, as many things did. Paddle shifting, a lot of, this was one of the first cars that really had successful, paddle change gearbox, reliable, successful piece based on a pneumatic compressor, based on a Megaline system. Very, very good, robust system. Good enough to run 30 hours without anything at all. And I showed you guys the internals in the gearbox. So once those protocols were sorted out, there was no stopping it. So very, very sensible design, and there was a lot of opportunities for the people who were developing the car to contribute to the car with their ideas. And that's one of the things that really made it great.
2001 would start off somehow better than 2000 at Sebring. Audi would get a 1, 2, 3, and 4 with Team Joest taking the top 2 spots, and the privately entered Champion Racing and Johansson Motorsport entries in 3rd and 4th, with the next closest entry 38 laps behind from the winning car. This year, Audi would have full season cars in both the American Le Mans Series and the European Le Mans Series, dominating both championships. At Le Mans, Audi would continue the full frontal assault on Le Mans, bringing the 2 Yost entries and the 2 privateer entries. For the first time, Audi would have numbers 1, 2, and 3 on board, albeit the number 3 entry from the private champion team. Audi would also have a new competitor for the overall trophy, with its sister brand from Volkswagen Group, Bentley, joining the fray.
The Bentley idea was really picked up on very early, and the Bentley was there at the time that the R8 LMP was introduced. So the Bentley Speed 8 was the first appearance was in 2001, and it was a decent car based on a on a monocoque and kind of a chassis style that we'd seen before. Some of the GT1 cars before it originally had a similar engine to the Audi, and no power steering. Had some other notable things about it, but it was fast and had good pace and was very much supported. And then as Bentley, was brought forward as a brand for part of the Audi group, they wanted to promote Bentley as a street brand, and so it was decided that it would be pushed very hard to promote it as a sporting brand, thus capitalizing on the previous Bentley successes back in the 30s and so on and so forth, and kind of tying those all together. So it became kind of a brand marketing sort of thing for all of the brands that want Bentley to be able to accomplish this. I wouldn't say that it was designed so that they would win that, but they were given great opportunity. And so the car developed quite quick. It's also very interesting to note that that car was really developed on the UK side of the of the race car development on the UK side. So there was a lot of influence from the UK ultimately on what the Bentley was going to be.
Le Mans 2001 would be more of the same dominance sports car fans were quickly getting accustomed to. In qualifying, the 4 R8s went 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, only separated by a Dome S101. Interestingly, the pole-sitting Yost R8 would be 4 seconds quicker than the pole time set in 2000. The top Bentley would line up in 7th. The 2001 race was a somber one for Audi Sport and Team Yost. In the run-up to their 3rd try at Le Mans, factory driver Michele Alboreto tragically lost his life in a testing accident at the Lauritz Ring. The crash was caused by a puncture initiated by a loose screw on the racing surface. At his funeral, Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich, head of Audi Sport, would say, "Michele, your whole life was dedicated to motorsport, the love of your family, and your close friends. I called you up for Audi in 1998 to share your experience and your energy in developing a racing sports car for Le Mans. In the shortest time, you won the hearts of the whole team and became one of us. Always open, helpful, and always there. You were a wonderful person and an extraordinary personality. With impressive professionalism and conviction, you were a perfect representative of Audi. With enthusiasm and dedication, you made it possible for us to develop an extremely successful sports car. You lost your life the day before yesterday while undertaking your favorite work in the cockpit of our R8 in preparation for your greatest goal, the victory at Le Mans with Audi. Michele, you gave us so much. We miss you terribly. You will always remain in our hearts." Afterward, Audi would develop a state-of-the-art tire pressure monitoring system to help the engineers on the pit box see a puncture before the result would turn catastrophic. Michele would be the only driver to lose his life behind the wheel of any Audi prototype. Le Mans 2001 is mostly remembered for 2 reasons: weather and the confirmation of the impending Audi dynasty. At the start, the number 2 Audi would jet away, holding a 7-second lead by the end of lap number 1. At another 6 seconds by the end of lap number 2, and you'll get a sense of how this race is going to go. The defending winners would fall to 4th at the start, but weather would set in shortly after. The rain would turn into a deluge, and many cars would lose control and crash on lap number 5. The 2 privately ran Audis would also be impacted by the weather. The Johansson Audi would be the worst off of the pair, retiring shortly after. In an odd sequence including the number 2 Yost Audi tapping a barrier and sliding into the Johansson Audi's pit box, hitting a few crew members, the Dome would inherit the lead before it too would make contact with the wall, be the Bentley team in the lead. Bentley would hold the lead for 2 hours before the number 1 Yost Audi would catch and pass the Audi-powered coupe. Shortly after, the number 7 Bentley would retire in flames after many electrical issues. The rest of the race would be an all-Audi fight that would die away in the waning hours, with the number 2 losing a lap after a gearbox change. The number 1 would successfully defend its crown with the number 2 car in second. Third would come the Bentley boys, taking the win in the GTP class uncontested. The 2 privately entered R8s would fall out of the race relatively early, leaving all the glory to Yost once again. 2002 would be a repeat of the successes of the previous 2 years. Another dominant Sebring win, and another unquestioned Le Mans victory. Team Yost would upscale back to 3 cars after having just the 2 in 2001, and it would be a clean sweep of the podium. Cars 1, 2, and 3, positions 1, 2, and 3, in that order, some 13 laps ahead of the nearest car, a Bentley. Audi Sport Team Go would join at Le Mans, though it didn't seem up to par with the Works team. It would come home some 18 laps back in 8th. 2003 would be a year of change for Audi. Team Yost would field a single car in the full season American Le Mans Series and would not seek to defend their three-peat at Le Mans with Audi. Yost would claim Sebring for the 4th straight year, with Champion Racing coming in second on the same lap. This would be the final year we would see a Yost ran R8 in any capacity, as they ran the full LMS with one car and the resources from the other car were moved to run one of the Bentley Speed 8s, and later they would begin to work on a new project within Audi. Le Mans would be a different story, however. With a Yost Audi absent, it was up to the private teams to take the mantle. Champion Racing returned after a year's absence, competing full season in the American Le Mans Series. Audi Sport UK would return for the first time since the R8C program in 1999. Finally, Audi Sport Japan Team Go returned, looking to improve on the 8th place finish from the previous year's race. Bentley would move to the forefront as the pre-race favorites. Not only would they have Team Yost on their side, they would also poach a couple of Audi drivers. Dindo Capello and Tom Christensen would move over, of which Christensen was going for his 4th straight win and 5th of his career.
Well, yeah, the R8 was outgunned by the Bentley at that point in time. You know, the tire technology had gotten to the point where the Bentley that actually carried a smaller rear tire than the R8 could create the downforce and the grip that it needed with that smaller tire, and it made it slicker and faster in a straight line. It had a bigger engine in it. It had a 4-liter engine in it by then. It had a brake with the restrictors. I think it had 34 or 35 mil restrictors at that point in time, which gave it a power advantage. Carried a little bit more fuel, closed cockpit, not quite so draggy. I mean, it had a lot of stuff going for it. We were very, very close to the development of that car because people we knew very well, first name basis, having dinner at their house, things like that, where people were working on that project while we're working on the R8 right next to them. So we knew that if the car ran through the race without any issue, that we really had no chance to beat it. But that if it ran with any issue whatsoever, we were going to beat it. But we didn't. And it should also be noted that there were 2 sides to the Bentley project, that there was a UK-based car and a German-based car. And the German-based car was basically run by Team Yost, and that was the car that won the race in 2003.
And the Bentleys would run flawlessly. They would claim 1st and 2nd on the grid in qualifying and carried it all the way home. The nearest Audi would be Champion Racing in 3rd, 5 laps behind. Though their overall win streak ended, Champion would take the LMP 900 class honors. Yost Racing would claim its 4th overall win in a row, and so would Tom Christensen. Seeking to win Le Mans and accomplishing that feat, the Bentley program would be wound down immediately after Le Mans, and after only 4 races ran in total. 2004 would mark the beginning of the end for the R8 program. LMP 900 became LMP1, and the new rules that came with the name change gave an end date for cars built to the LMP 900 specification. Cars like the R8 would be allowed to race until the end of 2005, but would become illegal for 2006. In the meantime, the R8 would continue to dominate. ADT Champion Racing would continue in the same capacity, as would Audi Sport Japan Team Go. Audi Sport UK would add Team Velox to their name, as well as a Sebring overall win. For Audi, it would be another clean sweep of the podium once again. Le Mans would see the last 4-car assault by Audi, and it would be a return to winning ways, albeit relatively unopposed. Several incidents in the race, including one involving 2 of the Audis with J.J. Lehto and Alan McNish, halved what was promising to be a thrilling intermanufacturer fight. Though the race was not boring by any stretch, the Team Go entry in its third try found itself in the lead, but being hunted by a much faster and unhindered Team Velox entry. Team Go managed to hold on to a 41-second lead to take their first Le Mans win. This would be the first and only time in the R8 era the margin of victory was under 1 lap. Audi again would deliver a clean sweep of the podium with its ADT Champion Racing entry placing third, and the second of the Velox Audis in fifth. 2005 had a somber feel about it. It would be the send-off season for the mighty R8 after 5 dominant years. ADT Champion Racing was looking to send off the mighty R8 in style. Audi Sport Team Velox and Audi Sport Team Go had wrapped up their involvement in the program at the end of 2004, so Champion Racing, one of the initial customers of the R8, was all that was left. Champion Racing would enter 2 full-season cars in the American Le Mans Series, capturing a 1-2 at Sebring. The LMP 900 spec R8 would go undefeated in Central Florida, a feat that no other car has accomplished since. Champion Racing would handily capture the 2005 LMP1 championship. Champion would also claim their third Petit Le Mans win in a row with R8 Chassis 605, a car we had the pleasure of seeing still in its 2005 livery, looking as it did when it last saw a racetrack at Laguna Seca in 2005. At Petit Le Mans, Audi would prove just as dominant as they had been at Sebring. Team Yost would win in years 2000, 2001, and 2002, with ADT Champion Racing claiming 2003, 2004, and 2005. In Europe, a lone R8 fielded by Team Orca would contest the Le Mans Series and would end up third in the championship, claiming only 1 win at Silverstone. Le Mans 2005 is perhaps most remembered from the R8's run in France. Pescarolo Sport and their refined C60 Courage were now not only the hometown favorites, but the favorites for the outright win. The R8 indeed was an old car by this point, but the situation was not helped by the rules pegging the car back. It had over 100 pounds of ballast added, as well as aerodynamic changes meant to slow the car down, and slow it down it did. The R8s that year were slower in a straight line than the fastest GT1 cars, something almost unimaginable now.
It had enough success by this point in time that it had become pretty well known that whenever we showed up, we had a chance to win the race. And the cars had been, I wouldn't say unfairly, but they had been towards the edge of unfairly handicapped. Just because they had been so successful that they really wanted to kind of create some difference there. And so the balance of performance, the BOP going into that year, really heavily favored the Judd-powered cars. We had very, very small restrictors that year. The car was barely able to go over 300 kilometers an hour. Now, this is a 320 mile an hour car that can maybe go 305, 308 now. So really, really, really hindered on its top speed and its power. And in fact, the whole race week in 2005, the fastest we went that race week in terms of top speed was in the tow behind Aston Martin. So we were slower than a GT1 level Aston Martin in a straight line. It was pathetic. But the car was extraordinarily reliable, and we knew how to run it as a team. And we focused on the efficiency, and we focused on the reliability, and we focused on our team tactics. And really, when you break down the 05 race between the Pescarolo and us, that they really, with some of the maneuvers that they pulled in the race, which they thought was going to advantage themselves, because the race was very controversial in a couple places. There were some yellows that really didn't need to take place at all, and they just happened to be when the Pescarolo was in the garage with gearbox problems. There was some very questionable things that happened in that race, but in the end of the day, it actually disadvantaged them more than it did us. And they struggled with us, and in the end, they had to concede. The car was overheating, and they couldn't deal with it. But it was, and I say this out of respect for that team because, Henry Pescarolo knows who I am. We've shook hands many times. He knows my name. I know his name. I just saw him at the Monterey Historics last year. And so forth. So I know the guy, and I know the team, and I know how hard they worked to try to bring that car to where they could win the race with it. And They didn't get a chance to do it, and some of it was their doing, and some of it was luck, you know. But it was tough to beat them. When we beat them, when we were in Parc Fermé, you really felt that, you know, France was disappointed that they hadn't done it, you know.
Le Mans 2005 would start with all of the pomp and circumstance that we all know and love, but it was bolstered by the crowd's enthusiasm as the hometown Pescarollos locked out the front row, with the nearest Audi third, 3 seconds adrift. At the start, the two Pescarollo Courage C60s set off on a blistering pace on a blistering racetrack. Ambient air temperature was over 90 degrees, making an already tough race even more difficult. Pescarollo held a firm 1-2 advantage, with Rio Michigami and the Dome Mugen taking third off the start. The Pescarollo advantage started to fade slightly when the number 17 entry of Sarthe Yari hit one of the factory Panos GT2 cars in Arnage, damaging the left front suspension and requiring a 4-minute stop in the garage. Not long after, the number 16 would also find itself in the garage with a gear selection issue, leaving the number 2 champion Audi with the race lead. The running was not fault-free from Audi's end either. Not long after assuming the lead, car number 2 went straight at Arnage, making contact with the tire barriers, requiring a right front suspension change. As the evening wore on, more issues arose. The number 4 Oreca Audi was delayed after a suspension failure of its own on the Mulsanne straight, leaving the number 3 champion Audi to lead. The night was mostly uneventful, with the number 3 entry holding the top spot but being hunted by the quicker sister, the number 2, and both being hunted by the number 16 Pescarollo. As day broke on Sunday, the gap between the sister champion Audis was decreasing every lap until Alan McNish suffered a tire delamination into Indianapolis. The car would limp back to the pits and would lose 18 minutes replacing the bodywork and right front suspension. The gap was now wide open for the number 16 Pescarollo to start hunting down the lead Audi at a pace of up to 5 seconds per lap. The run of the Pescarollo was blunted mid-morning after a 3-minute stop to clean the radiators, but would continue to press on. Meanwhile, the number 17 Pescarollo met an early end after Sarthe Yari again damaged his car, this time impacting a tire barrier on the Mulsanne straight. The car would be swiftly retired after making it back to the pits. As morning clicked over to afternoon, the 16 Pescarollo was now within a lap and a half and closing quickly. All the champion team could do was keep their number 3 car clean and on track and hope the checkered flag fell before their lead did. Fate would prove to be kind for Audi once again. With just over 90 minutes left in the race, the number 16 Pescarollo was pushed into the garage again to clean out the radiators. The 16 would emerge less than 3 minutes later, but this time permanently trapped 2 laps behind. All that was left for the winner elects to do was do the remaining distance, and that it did, easily. The team of JJ Lehto, Marco Werner, and Tom Christensen would bring home the final win at Le Mans for the R8. Christensen would inherit the name Mr. Le Mans after claiming his 7th overall win, 5 of which in the R8. 2005 would also see the American flag fly over the top step of the overall podium for the first time since 1967, a storybook ending for the R8 at Le Mans. 2006 would be the farewell encore for the R8. Champion Racing, newly reminted as Audi Sport North America, would contest 3 races with their Le Mans winning chassis 605 and a new silver and red livery. After 6 years, 80 races, 63 wins, and 77 podiums, it was time for one last send-off. On the streets of Houston, they would claim an easy overall victory, and at Mid-Ohio, they would finish 3rd overall, with a win in LMP1, being beaten by the 2 LMP2 Penske Porsche RS Spyders, a hinting of things to come. And finally at Lime Rock, in yet another altered livery featuring the names of all the tracks and drivers that the R8 competed at and with, the R8 officially ended its story where it spent most of its life, on top. From round 5 onwards in the 2006 American Le Mans Series season, a new sound would come to define the future of Audi at Le Mans.